What you talking about, Willis?
Welcome back, guys. Welcome to What You Talking About, Willis. I'm your host, Via. You can call me V. And it's Fight for Your Rights. So the last time I did a video, I apologize that it's been a little sporadic. Things have been hectic. I mentioned being able to pinpoint when you're being retaliated against by a former employer or a former contract. And I want to start with like a basic AI description, right? To confirm corporate retaliation, you must document a timeline showing you engaged in a protected activity, like reporting discrimination or like reporting sexual harassment. And an adverse action like firing, demotion, or bad reviews happen to you. And there's a clear causal link, often close timing or inconsistent reasons. So between the two instances, between the discrimination or whatever the protected action was that was reported and the retaliation, which was the firing, the demotion, the decrease in hours, etc. You use emails, witness statements, and performance reviews as proof, and then consult, obviously the EEOC and an employment attorney. So in my instance, in my situation, I did, in fact, have protected activities that I reported. It was not, in fact, a sexual assault, mainly because I had been reporting discrimination, and I was not ever being guided to speak to HR. It was never being documented that I was made aware of. I was not given any kind of resolution. I did often have concern. I do recall one time having to mention that in Texas we carry guns, and Second Amendment is very, very important to us. It was a knee-jerk reaction. I felt so threatened. I was in a room. I was the only brown person. I was the only woman, and I was the youngest. And we were having a conversation about the influx of immigrants into the city area of the city I was working in, and how a person was not accustomed to seeing foreigners, and in their neighborhood, they weren't taken to very kindly. They'd stare at them till they left, type of thing. It was one of those awkward moments where people like awkwardly laughed, and everybody looked at me. And I was just like, well, in Texas we carry guns. And it changed the subject, and we started having a conversation about, our fundamental Second Amendment right. But in essence, it was like, yeah, try that in the South. Good luck with that. I would never, hurt anyone. I'm not violent. I am peace, love, and light. And if it can't be peace, love, and light, I'm going to go. And if there's a problem with me going, then there probably will be a problem, because I don't care. I'm going to go, and this is not my vibe. Anyway, so I'm saying this to say that when I reported this, nothing happened. And ironically, and very catastrophically, it kept coming up in conversation. My heart would sink every time it did. But I was never given any kind of resolution times, because that was not the only occurrence. I no longer felt safe reporting any kind of adversity. And to be fair, I had no choice, because I was being verbally assaulted, verbally abused on group calls. And the solution that, remember this guy, Javier Dominguez, gave me was to ignore it. Right. I was being blamed for things not working. I was being blamed for timelines not being kept, not the timeline I created as the manager, but the timeline he created as, the owner of his company. and it was not a realistic timeline. I do remember thinking to myself, that is probably the worst idea I've ever heard, and I did in fact ask, what about insubordination? I will be seen as problematic for doing that. And it wasn't much longer after that I was actually called combative. I will also say, when I did finally report the verbal abuse in writing using very flagged language like toxic, I will be forced to leave, this is impacting my mental health, if this is not resolved, I will have to go. It's very trigger-centric language. It is very legal. You know, there are key words, mental health, and being forced to leave a job because of another employee's toxic behavior means I am not in a safe environment. It wasn't not even 30 days later that I was actually banned from the site for wearing a pair of these. So I walked about 5 feet into the lab. I realized, check my head, check my pockets. I did not have my goggles. And I turned around to go grab them, and I was seen by a Karen. And when I saw Karen see me coming back looking for my goggles in slightly panicked mode, I did IM message, Teams message, one of the owners, this guy, remember him? Yeah, okay. And was banned from the site that night, only after a 2+ hour business meeting where I essentially helped, along with another person, give him all the information he needed to continue after hours. I had to reschedule my flight to leave the next day because I was not going to be allowed back on Abbott Labs site in Portland, Maine. And that is corporate retaliation. Okay, so the last instance, which is actually the first instance of documented retaliation, happened Q4 through the end of my contract. And that was Q4 2021. I was nominated as consultant of the quarter, and the sexual assault happened January 2022. Putting up a timeline now so you guys can see. This is the culprit, the pervert. I did ask for judicial prudence in that it be classified as such, given that I am a rape survivor, and this man was well aware. He just did not care. I did share my vulnerabilities. While I asked him to please go work on his relationship with his wife, that we could in fact be friends, but I did not carry out sexual relationships with my friends, and also that he could get in a lot of trouble for this, given that I am a rape survivor. I continued to get verbally yelled at, assaulted, blamed. I was documented as being what seemed to be incompetent and unqualified to do my job. I was blamed for things that were not my fault, all the while I am working overtime, extra, to produce and meet these unjust timelines that were really just questionable at best. I was replaced as the PM for my slew of projects gradually, but the main replacement came in the summer, Q3 of 2022, when an HR person was brought in as the PM. Not once did this HR person ever mention anything about how I was being spoken to. I'm not going to tolerate it. Let me also add, secondly, Q4 2022, with another employee, an employee that was actually this person's subordinate, I was forced to intervene when this man, I can't call him a man, this person began yelling at this young lady who also happens to be a black woman. After she drove in a snowstorm to go on site to finish a task that we had not completed with this genius's schedule on a Saturday. I couldn't believe what was happening. But this is what I dealt with. For 11 months, this person spoke to me in a way that is unprofessional and damaging. Not only to me, but to those around me who possibly were ill-acquainted with who I was, who my business was, or maybe just unaware of what was going on. Also add that the third-party company of software, I was working on a specific software for a different company. They have since praised my work. It was not me.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about